The crux of self-contained guitar. The crux of anything is the most important point at issue. It is the core, it is the heart, it is the nitty-gritty. When I began contemplating how to teach this self-contained guitar method and thought back on my own musical beginnings, I quickly realized that three very definitive elements lay at the heart of my approach. These three elements form the crux of self-contained guitar, and they are the fretboard, the major scale, the triads. From the crux, we can extract all of the vital information required to make a sound beginning as self-contained guitarists. To not only know where each note is located on the fretboard, but to also understand how those notes relate to and interact with one another are indispensable tools that every guitarist ought to wield confidently in their musical tool chests. The crux enables us to truly rely upon ourselves as we start building the solo musical scenarios we crave. The goal is to have the crux so ingrained in our subconscious and our fingers that applying it to the guitar is akin to simply taking another breath of air. This, however, takes time and effort. So let's begin. This notion of practice. As you make your way through this course, you will find that each chapter contains fingerwork and paperwork exercises to be practiced on the guitar or written out on paper. Paperwork. I strongly suggest repeating the paperwork studies in this course numerous times as a form of ongoing study. Physically writing the note names out and repeatedly seeing them on paper will help further imprint them in your brain. Trust me, you want that. Fingerwork. Though you are free to move as fast as you like, the fingerwork studies are ideally suited to serve as regular long-term practices. There is a lot of information in these studies for your fingers and your brain to process, so allow them the time to absorb it. Be mindful as you work through each exercise. Since there is no actual timetable here, other than the one you establish for yourself, please feel free to move through the videos at your own pace. You are encouraged to pause and restart the video at any time in order to focus on specific sections in greater detail. I would like to stress that mastering, memorizing, or perfecting any fingerwork or paperwork exercise is not required nor expected before moving on to the next section of this course. In fact, practicing multiple exercises from different chapters simultaneously can actually bolster and reinforce the material. Chapter 1. The Fretboard. Self-contained guitar revolves around the comprehensive, intuitive, and intimate knowledge of the fretboard. The fretboard is the very lifeblood of any creative approach to using the guitar as a means of thorough, honest expression. If we were to think of it in terms of speaking a language, which music very much is, how could one form words without letters, sentences without words, paragraphs without sentences? The notes on the fretboard represent the letters and words in the sentences and paragraphs we form when speaking the language of music. So let's flesh out what exactly a solid knowledge of the fretboard looks like. The 12 chromatic notes. The 12 notes are spelled alphabetically A through G. 7 natural notes and 5 sharps and flats. A sharp or a flat occurs between every note except B and C and E and F. Sharps and flats are also referred to as accidentals. Though they have two different names, notes like A sharp and B flat create the same exact pitch, and therefore count as one note in the chromatic order. The 12 notes are found all over the fretboard. They occur everywhere a string meets a fret. In fact, each of the 6 strings of the guitar represents its own row of chromatic notes, starting on a different note with each subsequent string. The notes simply start over once we reach the 13th fret. Half steps and whole steps. The distance between each note is called a half step. The distance between 2 notes is called a whole step. On the fretboard, 1 fret equals a half step, and 2 frets equals a whole step. For example, A to B flat is a half step. C to D is a whole step. E to F is a half step. B to C sharp is a whole step. Unisons and octaves. Unisons and octaves are 2 very reliable ways to find notes as we move across the fretboard. A unison is the same exact note with the same frequency, while an octave is the same exact note but in a higher or lower frequency. Unisons are easy to spot by using the 5/4 determinator. You can determine the unison of any note on the fretboard by moving back 5 frets or 4 frets on the next string down. Move back 5 frets when moving down a string from the E, A, D, or B strings. Move back 4 frets when moving down a string from the G string. Octave shapes. Octaves can be found by referring to the very specific shapes they form on the fretboard. Low E to D, skip 1 string, up 2 frets. A to G, skip 1 string, up 2 frets. D to B, skip 1 string, up 3 frets. G to high E, skip 1 string, up 3 frets. Low E to G, skip 2 strings, back 3 frets. A to B, skip 2 strings, back 2 frets. D to high E, skip 2 strings, back 2 frets. Low E to high E, skip 4 strings, same fret. Paperwork. Among the PDF files that accompany this video series, you will find blank fretboard maps with both horizontal and vertical views. Print these blank maps out in order to implement the following two paperwork exercises. 1. Start with a low E string and write in the notes from the 1st to the 12th fret on the blank map. Then, fill in each subsequent string accordingly. Remember where the sharps and flats occur if you get stuck. 2. Pick one note and write its location on every string from the 1st to the 12th fret. Remember the 5/4 determinator or the octave shapes if you get stuck. If you do not have access to a printing machine, then I would encourage you to draw out your own fretboard maps by hand, using the PDFs as a guide. Fingerwork. Dig out a guitar and practice finding the notes on the fretboard. Pick one note and memorize its position on every string between the 1st and 12th fret. Use the 5/4 determinator or the octave shapes to get from one string to the next. Practice playing that note on every string in time with a metronome. Go slow. Allow enough space to make it to the next string and still stay in rhythm with the metronome. Keep the metronome dialed as low as possible in order for this to happen comfortably. Gradually increase the speed as the note placements get more familiar. Once you can play the note on every string at a quicker, more comfortable pace, select another note to memorize. Chapter 2. The major scale. When it comes to understanding how to make music from all of the chromatic notes, the major scale is where it's at. In my experience, the major scale is the single most important element in creating music. It's where every bit of harmony and melody come from. Who knew that when a curious fellow named Pythagoras hung a bunch of weights on different lengths of wire back in ancient Greece, we'd wind up getting Louie Louie. The major scale is the map, the atlas, the navigational tool by which we establish our sailing routes across and through the unpredictable waters of music. It is with the major scale that we first discover and then extract all of those harmonious and melodious gems from the deepest reaches of our imagination. So let's dig in. The major scale formula. The major scale is a diatonic scale containing 7 notes. The 7 notes are determined by following a specific series of whole steps and half steps from the root or the 1. The major scale formula is as follows: whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, half step. When it comes to building a scale using the major scale formula, C is a good key to start with, as it contains no sharps or flats. Since there is no sharp or flat between E and F and B and C, these two spots conveniently align with the major scale formula, which has half steps between 3 and 4 and 7 and 1. Major scales must always go in alphabetical order. No letters are skipped and no letters are duplicated. This is how a note is determined to be sharp or flat in a key with accidentals. For example, here is the key of G. The 7th note would be F sharp rather than G flat, because you can't skip F, nor can you have two G notes in a row within the same scale. Here's the key of F. The 4th note would be B flat rather than A sharp, because you can't skip B, nor can you have two A notes in a row within the same scale. Though there are no sharps or flats between B and C and E and F, accidentals can occur where they traditionally do not exist. For example, in the key of F sharp, F becomes E sharp to keep things alphabetical. There also can't be two Fs in a row. In the key of G flat, we would have C flat instead of B to maintain alphabetical order. We also can't skip a letter. In addition to F sharp and G flat, this concept also applies to the keys of C sharp and C flat. Note: though they contain different note names, B and C flat qualify as one scale since both are the same exact key pitch-wise. The same is true of F sharp and G flat, and C sharp and D flat. Therefore, there are 12 major scale keys as opposed to 15. Paperwork. Among the PDF files that accompany this video series, you will find this major scale worksheet. Write in the remaining major scale keys. Look for any similarities, patterns, or repetitions that may occur. Major scale intervals. An interval is the distance in pitch between two notes. Half steps and whole steps may get us started, but the major scale establishes a definitive set of intervals which lays the groundwork for the creation of chords. Any distance you travel from the root note becomes an interval of its own, and that interval derives its name from how far it is from the root. Root to 2, major second. Root to 3, major third. Root to 4, perfect fourth. Root to 5, perfect fifth. Root to 6, major sixth. Root to 7, major seventh. Root to root, octave. Fourths and fifths, along with unisons and octaves, are considered perfect due to their more stable sound. While some intervals can be more unstable or even dissonant, like the major seventh. C major scale intervals on the fretboard. Paperwork. Among the PDF files that accompany this video series, you will find fretboard maps with the C major scale. Circle each interval of the scale. Fingerwork. Play through the C major scale intervals on the fretboard. Not only will this allow you to familiarize yourself with the interval shapes, but, and perhaps more importantly, with the sound of each interval as well. Major scale fretboard patterns. Since we have 12 chromatic notes repeating on every string, the major scale can be found everywhere. Though it is convenient to construct a major scale on one individual string for the sake of learning, we can map the entire fretboard with the major scale and break it into patterns that can span 3 to 5 frets at a time. One pattern for every note of the scale. Each pattern derives its name from the scale tone it begins with. For example, pattern 4 begins with F, which is the 4th note of C major. Fingerwork. Among the PDF files that accompany this video series, you will find all 7 patterns of the C major scale. Beginning with pattern 4, practice playing each pattern on the guitar. Start on the lowest note of each pattern and play the scale in diatonic order, ascending to the highest note and then descending back down to the lowest note. Then, ascend from the lowest note once more until you land on the root note of each pattern. Pay close attention to the fretboard finger assignments for each pattern. Be slow and deliberate at first, saying the name of each note as you play it. Alternate pick each note using the index and middle finger of your picking hand. Always notice where roots are located within each pattern. Keep in mind that these are interchangeable patterns that will translate to all 12 keys. Enlist a metronome to keep time. Count notes as eighth, quarter, etc. and allow the timekeeping device to dictate tempo. Keep your body still other than your fingers. No foot tapping, no head bobbing. This is a solid way to develop a sound sense of rhythm. Once you've learned a pattern and can play it comfortably and consistently in time, move on to learning the next pattern in the sequence until you can perform all 7 patterns smoothly. The major scale patterns in this film were recorded as eighth notes at 80 beats per minute. The 12 major scale keys. Here are the 12 keys, written out in 2 different sequences. By fifths, and by fourths. Traditionally, these 2 sequences are presented as a circle of fifths or a circle of fourths. When going by fifths, we gain a sharp with each new key. And those sharp notes move in fifths as well. When going by fourths, we gain a flat with each new key. And those flats move in fourths as well. Though the notes contained in each of the 12 different scales differ from key to key, the major scale formula itself never changes. We can rely upon it to always deliver the same results every time. The challenge lies in not getting blindly locked into the fretboard scale patterns while losing sense of what notes one is playing. Maintaining a healthy balance of major scale comprehension and note awareness allows us to attain the self-contained guitar autonomy we're striving for. Chapter 3. The Triads. Chords are typically the basis for every guitarist's first love-hate relationship with the instrument. They pose quite a challenge with all of those tough stretches, yet once we have a few of those chords down, worlds open up to us, and we start strumming away whether we know what notes we're playing or not. But how are chords created? And where exactly do they come from? If you guessed the major scale, then you guessed right. The fretboard gives us the notes and intervals to create the major scale, and the major scale gives us the notes and intervals to create the chords. So let's jump in and take a deeper look at how chords work. Triad Formulas. Triads are chords that are formed by taking specific intervals from the major scale and combining them with the root note. Though there are no accidentals within the major scale formula, these intervals may be adjusted or altered by a sharp or a flat in order to create triad formulas. There are 4 basic types of triads, each with differing chord qualities: major, minor, diminished, augmented. Major. The formula for building a major triad is as follows: root, major third, perfect fifth. Symbolized by single capital letter or the abbreviation MAJ. Minor. Root, flat third, perfect fifth. Symbolized by lowercase m or the abbreviation MIN. Diminished. Root, flat third, flat fifth. Symbolized by the abbreviation DIM or a small circle. Augmented. Root, major third, sharp fifth. Symbolized by the abbreviation AUG or a plus sign. A flat third is also known as a minor third. A flat fifth is also known as a lowered fifth. A sharp fifth is also known as a raised fifth. When building a chord, any note you start on is considered the root, regardless of what key you're in. If you follow the root, third, fifth triad formula, the subsequent notes will fall into their respective places according to the root of the chord. Paperwork. Among the PDF files that accompany this video series, you will find this triad formula worksheet. Write out the notes for the various unrelated triads. feel free to use the major scales that you wrote out in the paperwork exercise from Chapter 2 as a visual reference guide. Chord Voicings. A chord voicing is an arrangement of triad notes on the fretboard. We will be taking a look at two types of chord voicings commonly used in self-contained guitar: inversions and bar chords. The root note does not have to be the first note of a voicing. As long as the notes of the triad are represented, they can be arranged or voiced in any order. This concept is found in inversions. There are three types of inversions for triads. Root inversion, root in bass. First inversion, third in bass. Second inversion, fifth in bass. Though these inversions are determined by which note is in the bass or on the lowest pitched string, it is vitally important to be aware of which note is on the treble side or the highest end of the triad as well. The treble side notes will be most often referenced when matching a melody to the chords of an arrangement. Fingerwork. Among the PDF files that accompany this video series, you will find fretboard maps containing all 4 C triads, gathered into 3 string groups called zones. Zone 1, the G, B, and high E strings. Zone 2, the D, G, and B strings. Zone 3, the A, D, and G strings. Zone 4, the low E, A, and D strings. Practice playing each triad shape on the guitar. Play through the 4 types of triad voicings, one zone at a time. Move up and back down the fretboard within each zone. Be mindful where root notes are located within each voicing. As with the major scale, these voicings are interchangeable shapes that will translate to all 12 keys. Also, pay attention to notes that fall on the treble side of the voicing. Enlist a metronome to keep time. Count the triads as whole notes at first, then work up to half, quarter, etc. The triads in this film were recorded as half notes at 80 beats per minute. Barre chords are movable chord voicings where one finger presses on multiple strings across the fretboard, while the remaining fingers form the other applicable triad notes. The barre chords utilized in self-contained guitar are derived from traditional E, A, and D chords. Despite containing more than 3 notes in each voicing, barre chords still act as triads. These major barre chords can become minor by simply moving the major third back 1 fret in each voicing to create a minor third interval. We will be using barre chords specifically for major and minor triads. Barre chords are played up and down the fretboard according to where the desired root falls on the E, A, or D strings. For example, these barre chords create 3 different ways to play a C major chord. Root on low E at the 8th fret. Root on A at the 3rd fret. Root on D at the 10th fret. If we look at each of the 3 C barre chords, we will find the 3 notes of a C major triad. We can also dissect the barre chord shapes and isolate some of the inversions. Fingerwork. Among the PDF files that accompany this video series, you will find this barre chord worksheet. Using the E, A, and D root barre chords, explore the various ways on the fretboard to play the chords. Remember to follow the root note to the desired fret on the specified string. For example, for B minor, use minor root on the low E at the 7th fret. Minor root on A at the 2nd fret. Minor root on D at the 9th fret. Though memorization of chord voicings is recommended, we want to be wary of getting locked into shapes with no mindfulness of the notes we are playing. Set aside time to analyze the notes within various voicings as you practice them. The harmonized major scale. If we start with a basic C major triad and move each of its notes through the major scale as a group, we find that a new triad is created for each scale tone. For example, let's follow the C, E, and G notes of the C triad through the scale sequence on the fretboard. C moves to D, E moves to F, and G moves to A. If we now consider D the root of the new triad, D, F, and A create a D minor triad, root, flat third, 5th. Now move the D minor notes through the scale sequence. D to E, F to G, A to B, with E as the next triad root. E, G, and B create an E minor triad, root, flat third, 5th. Let's move one more. E to F, G to A, and B to C. With F as our new root, we now have an F major triad, F, A, C, root, third, 5th. Following this sequential movement through the remainder of the scale establishes a distinct harmonic formula, known as the harmonized major scale. In the context of the harmonized scale, each note is assigned a specific corresponding chord quality: major, minor, or diminished. The formula for the harmonized major scale is as follows: 1. Major, 2. Minor, 3. Minor, 4. Major, 5. Major, 6. Minor, 7. Diminished. Within the harmonized major scale, triads are commonly notated with Roman numerals. No matter what major key we are in, these assigned chord qualities remain intact. The 1, 4, and 5 chords are always major. The 2, 3, and 6 chords are always minor. And the 7 chord is always diminished. Paperwork. Among the PDF files that accompany this video series, you will find this harmonized major scale worksheet. Fill in the remaining harmonized major scales. Fingerwork. Among the PDF files that accompany this video series, you will find fretboard maps containing the C harmonized major scale, arranged by inversion type in all 4 zones of the fretboard. Practice playing each C harmonized major scale on the guitar. Learn each scale pattern by inversion type, 1 zone at a time. Listen for the sound of the scale as you move through the chords. Notice points of tension and resolution while making your way through each harmonized scale pattern. Be mindful of notes and triad shapes. As we did with bar chords, observe how the inversion shapes can overlap and connect across the fretboard to create larger voicings. Enlist a metronome to keep time. Count the triads as whole notes at first, then work up to half, quarter, etc. Learning the harmonized scale across the fretboard is a gradual, long-term effort. There is no rush. Relax and take as much time as you need. The harmonized major scale patterns in this film were recorded at 80 beats per minute, with ascending half notes and descending quarter notes. Chord progressions. A chord progression is a series of chords which can be used to establish the framework of a song. Chord progressions are commonly taken from or based directly on the harmonized major scale, and as such are identified by their Roman numeral names. Here are a few examples of common chord progressions. The 1-4-5 is one of the most widely used chord progressions. Largely associated with blues music, it can also be found in a number of other musical genres. The 1-6-2-5 is often heard in doo-wop music or 1950s era ballads, as well as in jazz compositions. The 2-5-1 is an extremely popular turnaround in the jazz idiom. Of course, not all songs adhere to the harmonized major scale or even to one singular key. This is merely one approach to analyzing chord progressions. Paperwork. Among the PDF files that accompany this video series, you will find this chord progression worksheet. Determine the chords for this sample chord progression using the harmonized major scale formula. Fingerwork. Using the chord progression you wrote out in the previous paperwork exercise, utilize a variety of triads from all 4 zones to play this progression on the fretboard. For example, studying and comprehending the harmonic structure of songs can make arranging for self-contained guitar much easier. Suffice it to say, the triads can be a handful, pun intended. But climbing inside of them and really understanding where they come from, how to form them, how they function with one another, etc., can open up endless possibilities for the self-contained guitarist. This notion of practice. Time management is a key component to effective practice. Here are some practical scheduling concepts to consider when establishing a personal practice regimen. Create a schedule. Establish the most consistent means of practice that suits your schedule. 15 to 60 minutes per day is a great starting point, but do whatever you can. Plan each practice session and write out a schedule. Allot specific amounts of time for each exercise you work on. For example, 10 minutes for scales, 10 minutes for paperwork, 10 minutes for triads, etc. Watch the clock. Set a timer for these increments of time and switch to the next exercise when each period of time ends. This can be challenging because it may seem necessary to, quote, master a specific exercise or passage before moving on, but the effort we take in self-contained guitar is cumulative. Be consistent. Daily practice is ideal, even if it's only 15 minutes. If practice is impossible, make every effort to at least hold the guitar every day. Be flexible. It's great to have a set practice time every day, but keep various possible practice times at the ready, so that when life or work responsibilities fluctuate, you can still fit some practice in accordingly. Mix it up. Widen your scope of focus to allow multiple bits of information to sink in. Rotate the exercises you're working on as opposed to repeatedly zeroing in on the same exercise every time you practice. Here are a few unconventional practice concepts that have proven invaluable to my progress. Relax. Keep your body calm and casual, and remember to breathe. Breathing in time with exercises is hugely beneficial for relaxation and mindful practicing. For example, playing a scale with the metronome at any time, breathe in for an entire measure, and then breathe out on the next measure. A breath in for 4 beats, a breath out for 4 beats. Continuing that pattern through the course of the scale. Eat your vegetables first. Practice the least appealing exercises first, while saving the most enjoyable bits for last. Once the challenging, healthy parts are over, then it can be time for some fun musical dessert. Television practice time. Not all practice has to be intense and focused. Practice can happen under any circumstances. Don't be afraid to run exercises while doing something mindless, like watching television or listening to talk radio. This is a great way of fooling your brain and fingers into subconsciously building muscle memory. Non-practice time. Allow yourself as much unstructured, non-practice guitar time as possible. Make time to compose, improvise, fool around, etc. Listen without learning. This may seem obvious, but listening to music for the sheer pleasure of listening in itself, without analysis or transcription, qualifies as practice. And remember, you are what you listen to. It's very important to keep a balance of focused discipline and lighthearted fun when practicing. Be constant in your effort, but take care to protect and nurture your joy of playing music. If you get overly discouraged, or if you feel as if nothing is working, take a break. Get up and do something other than playing the guitar for a while. Take a walk, eat some cashews, do a jumping jack or two. Then go back later and try again.